Hello everyone and welcome back. We are on Chapter 7, Managing Risk. If we look at our roadmap or our process flow, we have gone through the first 6 chapters and now we continue in Managing Risk and schedule resources and costs for this week. Risk is an uncertain or chance event that planning cannot overcome or control, and management of risk involves understanding what can go wrong, how to minimize the event's impact, the consequences, what can you do to anticipate, or what can you do when an event actually occurs, contingency. The risk event graph shows high risk, or rather low to high risk and low to high cost on the y-axis and different project stages on the x-axis or the horizontal axis. So during defining and planning, the cost to fix a risk event is low because you really haven't done much to work on the project, but the chances of risk occurring are high. Moving forward in the project closer to delivery, the chances of risk to occur begin to decline, however the costs increase. So it's better to try to fix or understand risks when the costs are low. This slide explains the benefits of risk management. It's proactive rather than reactive, reduces surprises and negative consequences, prepares a project manager to take advantage of appropriate risks, meaning that all risks are not negative, they can also be beneficial to the project, provide better control over the future, and improves chances of reaching project performance objectives within the budget and on time. This is a diagram that explains the risk management process. Step 1 is identification, analyzing the project to identify sources of risk. Step 2 is the risk assessment and assessing each risk in terms of severity, likelihood, and controllability. Step 3 is risk response development. Develop a strategy to reduce possible damage, develop contingency plans. And step 4, risk response control. Implement risk strategy, monitor and adjust plan for new risk, and change management. So this slide goes into detail. Step 1, it explains that you would start with your macro risks first and then specific events. Risk assessment involves different tools and methods, including the risk assessment matrix, failure mode and effects analysis, probability analysis, and then scenario analyses. This is an example of a risk breakdown structure, taking the different deliverable areas of a project and breaking them down in the potential risk areas. So for technical, it's showing requirements, technology, complexity, and interfaces. Under organization, resources is a big risk area. Funding is also a risk area, as the corporate strategy might change or new things happen that aren't expected. This chart is showing your risk in terms of what are the objectives of the project. Remember our triangle. There's cost, time, scope, and quality. And then you can rate your relative risk using this numerical scale. Very low is insignificant to very high, some sort of numerical analysis of how does it increase cost, how does it increase time, how does it, it could also be decreasing time depending on whether it's beneficial or a disadvantage for your project. The risk assessment form lists the different risk events, and it documents the likelihood of the risk event occurring, the impact to your project, and the detection difficulty, how easy is it to detect, and when would it actually occur. This is an example of failure mode and effects analysis, where you look at the impact times the probability times the detection to give you an overall score or risk value. The chart shows that the green area would have low impact and low likelihood, whereas the red area would have high impact and high likelihood. The remaining steps, step 3, shows different ways to respond to risk, whether you mitigate it, avoid it, transfer it, or retain it. Again, it's not always, you can retain a negative risk, but you can also retain a positive risk or a beneficial risk to your project. Contingency planning is an alternative plan that will be used if a possible foreseen risk actually occurs. It's a set of actions that you would use to reduce or mitigate the negative impact. The issue of not having a contingency plan, it may slow your managerial response, and decisions made under pressure can sometimes be costly or dangerous. So again, this is a copy of this is a risk response matrix. It shows a risk event, the response to the risk, contingency plan, the trigger that lets you know to implement your contingency plan, and who is responsible. Some examples of technical risks, what you can do to respond, having backup strategies, assessing whether technical uncertainties can be resolved, scheduling risks, using Slack may increase the risk of a late project finish, compression of a project, other type of options that you would look into. Cost risks. Costs increase when problems take longer to solve than expected. Price protection risk, a rise in input costs. So those costs may rise if you're going from year to year and your vendor or service provider is increasing the cost for that company. Funding risk, changes in the supply of funds. So I mentioned that the corporate strategy may change, other important projects may be put in place, so that's also a risk. So for the positive or beneficial risks, to manage them, you can exploit them. You can seek to eliminate the uncertainty associated with an opportunity, and that's what instead of risk, it's opportunity. You can share, allocate some or all of the ownership of an opportunity to another party. You can enhance it and accept it. Those are different options. For contingency funds, another risk response, to have funds to cover project risks, have budget reserves and management reserves. Contingency funds are used to cover project risks, identified and unknown. Budget reserves are linked to identified risks, and management reserves are large funds to be used to cover major unforeseen risks, so to cover the unknown. Time buffers, amounts of time that can be used to compensate for unplanned delays in the project schedule. So this is similar to padding the schedule, which is not something that's recommended, but creating some sort of buffer to compensate for delays. This is just an estimate of contingency funds from your textbook. Step 4 is a risk response control, controlling risk, execution of the risk response strategy, monitoring of triggering events, initiating contingency plans, and watching for new risks to appear. Establishing a change management system to allow you to monitor, track, and report risk, fostering an open organization environment, repeating risk identification, assessment exercises, moving ahead through the project, and assigning and documenting responsibility for managing risks. This slide shows the sources of change, which can include project scope changes from either the client or business that you're servicing or providing a service to, or within your own company. Implementation of contingency plan could cause a change in the project, and improvements to make the project work better also represent changes. The change control system process, identify proposed changes, list expected effects, review and evaluate and approve or disapprove changes in a formal way so that it's documented, negotiating and resolving conflicts, conditions and costs, communicating changes, and so on. The important thing is that the project project manager tracks all the changes that are to be implemented in some tool that is available and accessible by all. Some benefits of a change control system: being able to maintain the cost of changes. It maintains the integrity of the work breakdown structure, helps the project manager allocate and use the budget and management reserve funds and tracking that, and the implementation of changes are monitored. This is a sample change request document that would be kept and issued and signed off on by different people. So at the bottom here it shows the sign-off approvals by the project manager, the project sponsor, and the customer. For your project in the next class, I would like for you to identify and create a plan for risks using the steps outlined in the chapter. This concludes Chapter 7.